Okay, this is a video for the required practical making copper sulfate crystals. So as part of your required practical, you have to make copper sulfate crystals, and they give you a range of things to do that. So what they give you is a couple of metals. So we've got copper carbonate, and we've also got magnesium carbonate. We've also got two acids to choose from. So we've got sulfuric acid and we've got hydrochloric acid. Now, we want to make copper sulfate crystals. So first of all, out of the two metals, I'm not going to need magnesium carbonate. I'm going to use my copper carbonate. And out of the two acids, so I've got copper, and I could react it with sulfuric acid to form sulfate, or hydrochloric acid to form chloride. So what we need is sulfuric acid because we want to make copper sulfate. So it's important to choose the correct one. So look at the name of the salt and choose the correct one. So part of your method now, what you'd write down first of all is number 1, collect all equipment and safety gear. And you might include in that copper carbonate and sulfuric acid. Now we're using 1 mole of sulfuric acid, so this is quite a strong acid, and this is so that the reaction happens at a good speed for us. We've also using copper carbonate. Now you can see it's got a picture of environmental hazards, so it's got a dead fish and a dead tree. This means it's not going down the sink when we're done. And it's got an exclamation mark. This means irritant, so if it gets on the skin or in my eyes or if I breathe it in, it will cause a mild irritation. Okay, the first thing I'm going to do is it's asking us to make a set volume of the acid. Sorry, set volume. So what we're going to be doing is measuring out. In this case, we will measure out 15 ml of the sulfuric acid. So in your exam, you just have to write down a volume. It doesn't matter if it's 15 ml, 10 ml, or what. As long as you write a volume and it's not ridiculous, you get the mark. But if you put in a set amount, you won't get any marks. So just give a number, a random number. I'm using 15 because it needs to go in my measuring in my evaporating basin. I want it to react quite quickly for this video, so I've only used a small amount. Now the first thing I need to do with this is I need to react it until all the acid has gone. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to add in the copper carbonate, and what will happen is the copper will form copper sulfate, so it will go from this lovely green colour, which is copper carbonate, to a blue colour. And what else will happen is the carbonate will release carbon, which will react with the oxygen in the acid, and it will form carbon dioxide gas. So what we'll get is we'll get carbon dioxide gas and water and copper sulfate. So you should be able to see as it goes in, it fizzes. So what I do during this experiment is I keep adding it until it stops fizzing. Okay? So just keep adding it until there's no more fizzing. You can give it a little stir every so often. I want to do this until excess. Excess means the acid is completely reacted, there's no more acid, and all that there is left is excess copper carbonate. Because at the moment, what's happening is the copper carbonate will dissolve and this will go see-through and blue. So it will turn clear and blue, which means it's all reacted. And what I want it to do is I want it to stay murky, because what we're going to do is we're going to filter the excess copper carbonate off. So just keep adding it. And you can see it's still bubbling, but not quite as much. So I'll just keep adding it. Give it a stir. We'll keep doing this until there's no more copper carbonate left. Sorry, sulfuric acid left. So you can see as I'm adding it now, nothing's happening. So adding it. There's no bubbles, there's just big ones from this. So that is fully reacted. One of the reasons we need to fully react it is to get rid of the acid, because we're going to be heating the acid and carbonate solution up to form crystals. And you don't really want hot acid. That's just going to make the acid a whole lot more dangerous. And also when we make the crystals, we want to be able to touch them, and if there's dried acids, that will form white crystals and they won't be safe to touch. So what I'm doing next is I'm getting rid of all my excess copper carbonate. Like I said, I added in more copper carbonate than I needed. I kept adding it until the fizzing stopped. And this was to get rid of all the excess sulfuric acid. So what I do then is I start filtering it. And you can see it's this gorgeous blue colour. Same blue that's all over my trays here. So copper carbonate goes from green, which is this colour, just like a turquoisey green, to a nice light blue. Just going to pause the video while that drains and we'll restart in a minute. Okay, we've now filtered, so this is our residue. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to heat it and turn it into crystals. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to separate. So if you remember, we had copper carbonate. So I'll write it here. We had copper carbonate. Plus your sulfuric acid. And that formed copper sulfate, which is our product. It formed carbon dioxide gas from this, so carbonate. That means carbon and oxygen, so it forms carbon dioxide from that. And it also forms water. So what we've got inside our and our mixture at the moment is the carbon dioxide has escaped into the atmosphere, it's just a vest. So we've got a mixture of copper sulfate and water. Because copper sulfate is soluble in water, that means it hasn't dissolved yet. So what we need to do is we need to evaporate it to remove it. So what I'm going to do is I've got an evaporating basin and I've got it on a hot water bath. Now, the reason I've got it on a water bath is because water heats up to 100 degrees Celsius, so it'll stop it from heating up higher than that. It'll also stop it from reacting too quickly, because if you do this and you heat it up directly, what you find is it starts spitting and bits of salt will fire off and hit you and burn you. So it's always a good idea to heat it over water. So I'm going to pour that into my evaporating basin. Put in as much as I can, because one of the main aims of this experiment is usually who can get the biggest or most crystals. So, we've got in there, we've got the blue liquid. You can see we're going to wait for it to start bubbling now. Now, how you do this second part of the experiment, on the practical it says it wants pure copper sulfate. This is copper sulfate and water. Now, when you make these, usually in school, you'd probably heat this until the water's mainly just evaporated, and then after that, you would leave it in the window and it would evaporate. And you'd form big blue crystals that look like diamonds. But that's still got water in it. That's got water crystallization. So when it forms diamonds, like when you get sea salt and it forms those crystals, it's actually got water inside the crystals. What we want to do is remove all of that water, and what happens is the copper sulfate actually goes into a white powder. So we'll be heating it now until all that water's turned it into big blue crystals. Then we'll just keep heating it. And the way we'll know all the water is gone is we'll weigh it. So what we'll do is when it looks dry, we'll put it on a scale, so we'll weigh it. Then I'll put it back onto the onto the water bath and leave it for a minute, and I'll take it off and I'll weigh it again. And I'll keep doing this until the scales no longer decrease, and that gets rid of all the water crystallization. I'm going to pause this now until it evaporates a bit more and heats up. Again, you can see we've got to the point of crystallization. So it's actually starting to turn into little blue crystals. So this is a point where normally we would then put it in a window because it takes such a long time. So it's been boiling here for about 30 minutes to get to this point. But in this case, we're going to just keep heating it until it turns into a white powder. So I'm going to pause it again, and hopefully at that point we should be getting to the point where nearly all this liquid has dissolved, well, evaporated, leaving just copper sulfate crystals. Reached the point now where all the water has officially gone. So what we're going to do is we're going to start the waves. So I'll put this, see if we can see both. So what I'm going to do is using, I'm going to make this 0. So using the tongs, I'm going to take it off, I'm going to weigh it. Put it here. So you can see at the moment it is 60.23 grams. So I'll put it back on. I'm going to leave it a minute and I'm going to take the weight again, and I'm going to keep doing that until it no longer changes. Now this is going up to 6 because it's got water on there, so we'll just remove that by pressing tare each time to make sure it's a fair test. You can see that the water's going, because if you look carefully you can see these little lumps here, like that one and that one. They are whiter than the main bit, and that is because the water crystallization is going. I can actually scratch them using a glass rod. Scratch. You can see there's still some water in there. I'm waiting for it to all evaporate. So I'll pause it and do the, well, we'll wait again. So it was 60. So now 60.16, 15. 4. So remember, it's evaporating because this is so hot. It's evaporating right now. I'll leave that on there and pause the video and be back in a minute and we'll do it again. So you can see it's starting to turn white now. So I can actually just give them a little scratch, pick them up. I'm going to weigh it. So let's have a little look. And that's 0. So now we're on 59.89. 59.89. So we'll give it another go. Give it a good stir and a scratch. So I keep repeating this until it no longer changes mass. So I'll do it one more time, so put it on there. It's now gone down to 59.93. We're going to stop there. So in what you need to do now is you need to write a method for this experiment, including the water of crystallization at the end.